What a title. There aren't many titles that are pronouns, you know? And
Mhm.
this is a really interesting word, her, because it can either be a possessive pronoun or it can just be a direct object, you know? And I was kind of like writing this little thing down where you can consider the sentence her consciousness, which is possessive, or the consciousness is her, in which case her becomes a direct object. And
Yeah.
that's just kind of, that tickles me. It doesn't necessarily have a lot of meaning, or maybe it does. I don't know. You tell me.
Everything's got
But
meaning.
everything's got meaning. That's why we do this. So, but let's start with you. I started with the overall takes. So I'd love to know what you think about this title. Go for it.
Yeah, the title I find fascinating because, like you said, you don't see a title that is a personal pronoun very often.
Yeah.
Usually, if you're seeing something that's signifying an individual, it's the person's name or the thing that they do. And if we're going to go off of, this idea that the title should in some way shape, like, it explains what your story is about.
Mm-hmm.
Like everything that happens, it's like, what's it about? That. The best
Yeah.
titles always do that, and I think I've said that on another episode. Um, if you can sum up the entire narrative with the title, then you have a good title.
Yeah.
Her is referring to two different things in
Okay.
this because it's about Samantha, but it's also about Catherine. But more
Yeah.
importantly, it's about her through Theodore's eyes because he's on the one sheet looking right at us.
By her, in this case, you mean Catherine.
Both.
Oh, both. I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it was designed to be intentionally vague, but I think
Yeah.
it's about her, Catherine, and
Mm-hmm.
Samantha through Theodore.
Uh-huh.
It's about her from his eyes. Because he is our protagonist. We follow him.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also about his relationship with Amy.
Yeah. I was thinking the same thing.
Because it ends with
Trifecta.
her putting her head on his shoulder. They dated very briefly in college. And as a film about relationships and, and heteronormative relationships, you've got three people that could all refer to.
Yeah.
And most people would probably jump to Samantha first, but that's where I think it's about all three of them. And it's through Theodore's perspective because we follow him.
I agree. I agree with pretty much everything you just said. Just to put a little bit of a cap on that, I was prepared to say the same thing. I do love that the movie does give you this ambivalence about who, when we're talking about pronouns, I think when we see a pronoun, especially when it's by itself and it doesn't have that context, right?
Yeah.
To wrap in everything else into it, we are immediately wondering who that is referring to, So it automatically does make you, as a viewer, or just seeing the poster or thinking about the title, ask the question, okay, who is that person? We're so used to being able to attach the noun to the direct object or whatever it is, right? That when there is nothing there to attach to it, we're automatically floating in outer space and we say, wait, but I need to know who that is. Tell me, So I think there's something natural about that. But yeah, not knowing who it is, I think is very, very important here because I think Jones is talking about different types of love here.
Yeah.
And the love that you would feel for a friend, I think it's one of the biggest, not biggest, but it's one of the most hidden plot twists, I think. It's a very different kind of plot twist. I almost see it as a twist where the whole movie is about this guy's romantic relationships and the romantic relationships of pretty much everyone around him, that the movie becomes in what? The last, to be generous, even 20 minutes, a few scenes, especially the last scene, but in the last 20 minutes, maybe the third act, the movie just becomes about the power of friendship. Like that in itself is almost like a twist,
Mm-hmm.
right? It is not about that until that moment. I mean, he spends some time with the character, the coworker that he works with, and they go on double dates and stuff like
Yeah.
that. The guy with the shirt that he likes, but
Which is so funny as an
yeah,
aside that's pre Guardians of the Galaxy Chris Pratt.
yes,
And
I know it really is weird.
it's also fascinating watching that because when he's first introduced, I would have to watch it again just for that specifically, but I feel
Yeah,
like when we watched it, it looked like he started off as like kind of fat Andy Chris Pratt from Parks and Rec. But then by the time we get to the beach double date, it's like almost ready to shoot Guardians of the Galaxy Chris Pratt, and they were just like styling him with that consciously in mind.
yeah, that's
It
so
also
true.
helps that they put all of the men in this in like the worst like pants I've ever seen in my entire life, and was
I
just like,
know.
yeah, high waisted everything. Where they're
Yeah,
sweatpants chinos, they're the pants of the future, and they're just like the
yeah, but
ugliest things I've ever seen.
yes, but you know what? It could be pretty prophetic because right now, and we're recording this in late 2024. Look at like Harry Styles and all these. It is trendy right now to dress like a 90-year-old grandmother,
Yeah, but
and I
but
see a lot of people doing it.
are
And those,
people wearing are people wearing their pants up to their tits? Or I spend a lot of my time inside editing, so I don't see people
yeah,
right now. Like, are people wearing their
yeah,
pants up to their tits right now, or like,
maybe not up that high, but they're definitely wearing like these granny sort of pants or grandpa pants,
wow,
and they're pretty high. There's a huge like resurgence of that in hipster culture right now.
that's so funny. That is so prophetic then.
Yeah,
Because I
yeah.
thought we were going back. I remember last year being on a set, and one of the models on set was wearing super low rise jeans as like the clothes she showed up in before she was put in the wardrobe. And I
Hmm.
remember being like, "Are we going back to like the early 2000s low rise pants?"
I feel like
Man,
right now it's just anything goes.
I
Quite
feel like
honestly,
right now
it's the '90s again.
we're all just doing whatever we want at this point.
Yeah,
Trends
yeah,
just trends are dead. They're not
yeah.
dead, but
And
it
there's a
just
sort of like banality out there, which I think ties into this movie too.
yeah
And the last thing I'll say about the title is I do like that the even the title seems to be from the introspective sort of perspective of the character because he's also wondering who is the person for him.
yeah.
Like how when we use those expressions like Mr. Right or Mr. Wrong or
Mm.
who the right him or I don't know whatever it is, trying to find Mr. Right or the right guy, and all of these are like little suitcase terms and expressions that are very vague because you're supposed to fill them in with whatever that person should be. The whole point is that it's vague because you haven't found it yet. And he even says in the film that he's so constantly confused. So for the title to be a little bit vague and confusing to us, it also shows like the sort of cloudy perspective of the character just kind of galumphing around and not really knowing exactly who her even really actually is himself. And Jones is giving us that right in the title. I think it works
Yeah.
incredibly well. It's so good. It's such a good title. It almost makes me wonder why it wasn't. I'm sure there might be some obscure film called Her, from at some point, but it makes me wonder that how it hadn't been used yet for a
Mm.
big movie that everyone knows about. It was just waiting there in lights. It was the perfect title.
I
I
think
want to know
there's
what Jones like, what his face was when he thought of that title.
there's something
Eureka.
also, I would almost differ on the Eureka moment, because given given that he was a music video director,
Mhm.
there's something kind of mavericky in the way that a music video director thinks, because the lexicon of filmmaking allows for so many different things that
Yeah.
most traditional filmmakers might not deem like correct, that he could have also come up with her like right on the spot. And because
Yeah.
because he is dealing in a form of filmmaking primarily that is so much more flexible in what the norms are,
Yeah.
that it might not have been a eureka. It could have just been, well, yeah, that's the title.
Yeah. It
You
could
know,
be. It
it's
could
because it's
be.
also it's the kind of title that I would absolutely expect um, a music video director to come up with, because it is so mavericky in a way,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
funny considering how traditional somebody like David Fincher is, and he's arguably one of the greatest music video directors of all time.
Yeah. Yeah. Traditional in some senses, not all
Yeah.
of them, especially visually, but
Mm.
I understand exactly what you mean, and I think that's
Well, and Spike
that's a
Jonze also had a background with like BMX racing, and I think he was also associated with the
hmm.
Jackass crew too.
Oh yeah, I think I remember reading about that
Yeah.
too at some point.
So
Yeah.
that's so if he was associated with the Jackass crew, that's another thing that would give me an expectation that
Yeah.
like, yeah, it
I
would
would have
make perfect sense that he would come up with a movie called Her.